Hello and welcome to the Essentials Starter Pack. So I'm really excited about this lesson because although it's not really to do with drawing or art skills, I tried to think about what I would pack in the bag of someone who's about to venture out on the path of an artist, and these are the things that I came up with. Just bits and pieces of information and knowledge that I think would be useful for the journey. So let's get started. I thought I'd start with my own setup because it's been a while since the last time I spoke about my setup publicly. I had a sponsored video on YouTube where I did a little bit of a room tour. But since then, I've moved my main workspace. I went to a different room and my setup looks a lot different than before, because if you guys have seen my video on my room tour, I had like two massive screens the size of this one and a huge 27-inch Cintiq on top of that, along with a laptop on the side. And the laptop was powering everything. That was quite the setup indeed. But now I've downsized a little bit to just this one main screen and my smaller Cintiq 16-inch Pro. So I'll just quickly go over all the parts first before I go into detail. I have a phone holder here for VTubing. That is how you are able to see my face. The phone here. Actually, I have it normally behind my screen so that the camera just kind of pops out just behind it instead of in front. I tried having it in front, but it blocks too much. Along with my mic is still in front, and if you ever see me like moving like this, well, that's because my mic is in the way. It is a Blue Yeti mic, and here I put my PC specs in case you're interested in them. It is a new PC that I built this year. I have a very cute PC case that I'm happy with because it's quite small. I have a Logitech Lift vertical mouse. I changed from I put the name of the other one, but it's the same brand, just a different type. I changed from the other one because, well, this one's pink and it's a little bit smaller, so it fits my hand a bit better. I also changed my chair this year. I really like this chair. It not only looks good, it just has so many adjustments that it just works really well for me. Also, it's a bit smaller than my previous chair. And yeah, it just fits me as a person way better. I have my Ducky Mia Pro Sakura mechanical keyboard. If I'm not drawing, I actually just put the keyboard on top of my tablet. But if I'm using the tablet, then I'll have it just hobbling in front here on top of my Cintiq's cables. I have the Toolbox Elite. I use this for hotkeys now instead of the keyboard. I've been using the Toolbox since they gave one to me. I don't remember when that was. It's been probably a couple years now. They gave me the Toolbox Neo for reviewing, and then I liked it so much that I ended up buying the Toolbox Elite because it came in white, and I really wanted the wireless because I have a lot of wires and I don't know what to do with them. I just wanted less wires. Is the Cintiq 16 Pro. So let me get into a little bit about what I like about my tablet. So my current favorite tablet is the one that I am using right now, which is the Wacom 16-inch Cintiq Pro. The reasons that I like it so much are because it's portable, it has great pressure and accuracy, and it can convert between display and non-display. Most display tablets, and just a quick explanation between display and non-display. So display tablets are the ones where you draw on the screen and your pen is right here and your hand is holding it. And you're just drawing on the tablet directly and you see what you're drawing on the screen. Then the non-display tablets are the ones that are flat on the disk and there's no display here, there's no screen, and you look at a separate monitor. So most display tablets can actually convert to a non-display. Essentially, my tablet, it still has a display on it, but I'm just using the tracking and applying it to the monitor instead. The reason I like to do this sometimes is because my home monitor is quite large and quite nice, so I have more real estate, as I like to think about it, and I can add detail more easily while seeing the entire picture. Because otherwise on a smaller screen, you just don't see as much detail. So the other reason, portability. I really value portability because I travel a decent amount for conventions. And great pressure and accuracy. I'd say that Wacom in general has had the most reliable pressure and accuracy, but I could have a bit of a bias just because most of the tablets that I used growing up, there was the Bamboo Fan, Intuos Medium Pro, and then the 27-inch QHD Cintiq. These were all from Wacom, so I might have just gotten used to what they provide. I have a feeling that if you used a tablet that has a little less pressure and accuracy, perhaps you would be used to it over time. But I'd say that Wacom does tend to give you that little bit of extra quality of life in those aspects. But I would not recommend this tablet for everyone. So I'm going to discuss the main factors that you should think about when you're choosing between the tablet that you're going to buy and use. So when it comes to display tablet versus non-display, if budget is not your main deciding factor, because no matter what brand, the non-display is going to win when it comes to being cheaper, for sure. Display tablets are they're just more expensive, no matter where you go. But if budget is not the main deciding factor, then I'd say it's a matter of preference between the two. There's not a huge impact on your artwork, no matter which one you decide to go with. However, some people are never able to find an ergonomic setup for the display tablets that work for them. Non-display tends to have better ergonomics out of the box as you're able to sit up and look at the screen, and that just makes it easier on your back and neck automatically. That's not to say you can't have an ergonomic setup with the screen tablets. It just means that you generally have to think about how to place your setup so that it doesn't strain your back and neck. Whereas the non-display, it kind of does that a bit better automatically. When it comes to the size of the drawing tablet, I think I can speak on this because I have used quite the range of tablets. If you have a look at the bottom, I've had the Bamboo Fan, which is about the size of this one, and I've tried a bunch of tablets in this medium category, and I've had the 27-inch Cintiq before. My opinion on the sizing of tablets is that the larger size is good if you are actually someone who uses their shoulder or arm to draw, because you have more space to work with and do that. You also have more canvas, or as I said before, real estate. You can zoom in while seeing so much of the picture, and that can really help with detailing. I've noticed that sometimes when I draw on my smaller tablet, I definitely find it a little harder to detail than when I use my monitor at home. But it's not a deal breaker. It's not a huge issue, just like a slight difference, for me at least. And I am personally a wrist drawer, so even when I had my massive Cintiq, I mostly just drew in one spot. Just imagine just one spot of the screen, just like all drawn over, and the rest of the screen is just for decoration, I guess. The other thing about having a massive screen is figuring out the setup. You really need a permanent setup. I moved house with my giant Cintiq 6-7 times. It was the worst having to mount it and unmount. But to be fair, I had a really bad mount. It was like a really cheap mount and it was quite difficult to mount. But if you use the expensive Wacom one, it is actually quite easy to mount and unmount, I have discovered. Not all mounts are not all built the same. They come in very different quality of life standards. But yeah, you definitely need to think about how you're going to have your Cintiq in front of you. And do you like having the screen so close up to you? Because the Cintiq, you're going to have to tilt it up. Because if you work with a table and your Cintiq is just on the table like this, it's pretty terrible to work with. You're gonna turn into a shrimp. But if you have it up like this, with a stand or generally the two options for holding it up. If you have it up, you're going to be working very close to the monitor. Like your face is quite close to it, your body is quite close to it, and the Cintiq is probably very close to the edge of the table. So you just want to consider if this kind of setup works for you. It's kind of similar to those old, it's almost having like a really old animation disc that tilts upwards. Very traditional kind of feeling, I suppose, except it's a screen. It's not a disc. It's not paper. It's a screen with light shining onto you. I definitely prefer the smaller size now just because, as I said before, I travel too much. Moving around with the smaller screen is just so much easier than before. The smaller tablets, these ones, are great to stop, honestly. I had a Wacom Bamboo Fun for 6-7 years when I was drawing, and I thought it was the best thing ever. I think if you're just starting out, it won't make a huge difference whether you go for this one or this one, but I think that the medium size is a little bit better long term and in terms of ergonomics, just because you have the ability to move your hand a little bit more. Not your hand, your arm. Because this one kind of forces you to use your wrist because the size, the drawing space is just so small. Whereas this one opens it up to using your arm. And using your arm can be really helpful. For example, for drawing straight lines. Using the wrist is quite hard, but using the arm or the shoulder for drawing long straight lines is just much easier. So yeah, honestly, I like this size the most, this medium size. Whether you get a display tablet or a non-display. I tried the 24 and I actually quite like that one as well. It's just the whole thing of figuring out your setup. How is your setup going to work? Where are you going to put your keyboard? Are you going to have any other monitors? And where are those monitors going to go if you have a massive monitor in front of you? It takes a bit more work, but it can work for some people. I'd say this size is just the most foolproof. Next stop is branding. So out of the brands out there, the ones that I've tried are Wacom, Apple, XP Pen, Huion, and Artisul. I'd say I have the most experience with Wacom and Apple. And then XP Pen, Huion, and Artisul, I tried out their devices for reviewing purposes. So they contacted me, asked me if I could review it, and so I had the chance to try those out. But I didn't use them for a long time, like my Wacom tablets and my iPads. So out of these brands, if you're on a tight budget, I'd say definitely go XP Pen and Huion. They are quite value for money. They are really powerful tools for much cheaper. They do have a few aspects where they don't match up to the quality that I've gotten from Wacom and iPad, but I'll go into that afterwards. So for the iPad, I'll talk about the iPad first. I would say iPad is really good if you're transitioning from traditional. One, because of Procreate. Procreate is just an amazing program, and it has such a great variety of brushes available that just match traditional mediums really well. I'd say the best watercolor brushes I've ever worked with were on the iPad with Procreate. And it has extremely low parallax, so it just feels very natural drawing on the iPad. And what I mean by parallax is the space between the end of the pen, the tip of the pen, and the screen. So for a lot of other tablets, including my Wacom Cintiq, this is for display tablets, there is the width of the glass. So the glass actually creates a parallax effect between the pen and the screen, like where the cursor appears. Wacom is actually really good at the tracking. So if you're tilting your pen, the cursor will actually make up for that tilt, and it's going to follow the tilt of the pen. Say your pen is tilted this way, and it's going to follow this line, and the cursor is going to show up on this side of the pen. And if you tilt the other way, it's going to show up on this side. So that's what I mean by tracking accuracy. The number one reason I'd recommend the iPad to anyone is its portability. If you want a powerful drawing device that you can bring anywhere, then I'd say that the iPad is for you. I used to use it to draw on the plane, at the airport, on the trains, at uni, on the way to uni. It's just so easy to whip out and start drawing. Moving on to Wacom, I would recommend Wacom if you just want a bit of extra quality of life and you don't mind paying the price point that it comes at. Because my experience with XP Pen and Huion, they were both really good. However, XP Pen had this issue I found where the minimum pressure threshold was slightly higher than I was used to. So the weight of the pen itself just on the tablet wasn't enough to register a mark. Whereas if I'm just putting the weight of the pen on the Wacom tablet, you can see that the dot still appears. Whereas for XP Pen, you actually have to apply a bit more pressure. And I didn't like that, one, because I'm a light presser, two, because I don't want to press harder because it is not really good for your wrist. That was my main gripe with the XP Pen. And from speaking to others, they've also noticed the same thing. It's not a huge issue, to be honest. Like, it wasn't like you have to press super hard to get it to register. It's just that I'm used to Wacom, so I have that frame of reference. With the Huion screen, it didn't have the pen pressure issue. It would register when I just put the pen on the tablet. However, the accuracy around the edges of the tablet got really bad. no matter how many times I calibrated it. So you know how I said if you hold the pen at an angle, it'll calculate where the cursor is meant to be, like in regards to the angle that you're holding the pen to. So the Huion, it just wasn't so good at calculating where the cursor should be when I was holding the angle around the edges of the tablet. So around these parts. And so that wouldn't affect the drawing so much, but it was a little annoying because I like to use my pen to scroll sometimes, to scroll things. There's just like a little bit of just another gripe from having gotten used to Wacom's standards. But I'd say it's not a huge issue, and honestly, for what you're paying for, it's both brands provide really great tools that you can use to draw really great art. If you're deciding between the two, I'd say that the factor you should consider is if they offer support in your country so that you can easily return or refund if there happens to be any issues with the product, or contact someone for help. So my last point is portability, which I've already talked about because how can I mention iPads without mentioning portability? I'd say that the iPad is definitely at the top of the list for portability and having just so much capability in such a tiny form, if that makes sense. But other tablets, I'd say anything under 16 inches is pretty portable. 16 inches is like the size of a standard laptop, and it fits into my carry-on luggage quite easily. The screen tablets are definitely heavier so the display tablets are definitely heavier than the non-display when it comes to bringing them around places. And no matter what, whether you have a display or a non-display for traveling, you will need to have a laptop or a desktop if you somehow lug your desktop around. And for the laptop to work, you'll need a cord. So I believe the non-display tablets will be better in that aspect because they just have one cord, whereas the display tablets will have two, at least two. So mine has a USB-C and the power plug for the screen. Whereas this little guy down here just has one, I forgot what type of cable it is, but just one cable. Okay, I hope that discussing these aspects helped you perhaps decide between what type of tablets you want. Moving on to the next section, I want to go over the software that I use. These are the main art-related software and helpful websites that I like to use. So Eagle, it's essentially like having your own little Pinterest on your computer. You can drag and drop images into Eagle from your browser and it just saves it for you. And you can use a tagging system to find pictures that you've saved really easily. Or something really cool is that they have a search by color function where you pick a color and it's going to show you all the artwork that have a significant amount of that color. I think that's super cool. You can also search by other things such as the date, dimensions, size, shape, folder, and tags. Yeah, this is really great for building up a visual library. The other thing that I like to use for visual references is Google Photos. Google Photos is really great just because of the search function. So these are photos that I've taken, and Google Photos, I just go into my Google Photos and type in what I'm looking for, and it's just going to pop up because I think they have some kind of AI going on where they can tell what the picture is of. And then instead of having to scroll through all my photos that I've ever taken and try to think about, oh, what date did I take that one photo that I really need, I can just search it up instead. As shown here, sky and flower. You can see what pops up. This is great if you take a lot of real life reference pictures, which I totally recommend. Real life reference pictures are the freest art resources you'll ever get. The next software is called Purif. I can't live without this program. It is just amazing for making a mood board or reference board. This is where I chuck the pictures in from Google Photos and Eagle. I chuck them all in and arrange them. Then I zoom in and out and look at this all the time while I'm drawing. I pretty much always make a mood board for every illustration that I'm working on. Or if it's commercial work, then I'm going to screenshot the brief and I put it in here. And it's just so much easier to have the brief and the references all in one place. Next is Dropbox or Drive. So I use Drive mostly just because I'm in the Google ecosystem. But recently I checked out Dropbox, and Dropbox is actually looking better for this service specifically, just from my first few impressions of it. What I want you to do with Drive and Dropbox is to set up a cloud backup system. This has saved me so many times from blue screens or just random crashes. If I have a file that has, I forgot the word, corrupted. So it's corrupted and I open it up and the layers are all messed up and glitched out. It's a rare occurrence, but it has happened. Then luckily Drive, it is constantly backing up my work, and it actually backs up 100 copies at a time and up to 30 days. Up to 30 days. So once the copies reaches 30 days old, they'll start deleting it because otherwise, it's too much space. But up to 30 days is a great amount of time where if you need to go back to some older version of your file, you can. And it's just automatically uploaded in the background onto Drive. So useful. Sometimes when I'm drawing, I just delete layers by accident that I didn't mean to delete. And then I notice, like an hour later, I worked on this already. Where is it? And I can't find the layer at all. I must have deleted it. So I go back into my Drive and I look for the older version of the file that has been backed up. And I download it and I copy paste the layer over. So it's not Drive specifically. I think it's called Backup. Or they might have changed it to Drive, but look for the function where it's a cloud service that backs up your work automatically. Not just Drive itself, which is just a cloud service without the backup. As you can see, there's a My Drive. This is just like where I can dump things in, and computers. So computers are the computers where I've set up the backup system. They just all show up there. Finally, we arrive at Clip Studio Paint. Actually, there's one more that I kind of left out. Procreate. I'm sorry, I forgot about you, Procreate. How could I? These are the two main art software that I use currently. Clip Studio Paint is very versatile. It's amazing for anime style. I used to use Paint Tool Sai a long time ago and also Photoshop, but I found that Clip Studio Paint is a good in-between Sai and Photoshop, where it has some of the editing tools that Photoshop has, and it has the smoothness of Sai. Procreate is just a great tool on its own as well for the iPad. I prefer Procreate on the iPad just because it's got a very intuitive gestural control. But primarily these days I don't draw on the iPad as much. I definitely use Clip Studio the most. But since we have an entire video dedicated to getting to know Clip Studio Paint, that is where I'll leave you with the introduction to software. I definitely recommend you guys check these things out if you didn't know about them already. I use all of these all the time for my artwork, and I find them incredibly helpful. This next part is about the answer to why your back hurts. I've decided to include this section because being an artist requires many hours sitting in one position. Thus, along with stretching and taking breaks to move around, we need to make sure to optimize that one position so that we can continue to keep drawing for a long time. It can be easy to simply blame it on having bad posture. But what if we aren't helping ourselves sit in a good posture in the first place? Finding the optimal chair and setup are really important for the long term. My own experience. In the past, I had a Secretlab Omega chair. I've actually drawn it right here. So I had this chair, except it came with armrests. I just didn't draw the armrest on the side view. It was not a bad chair. I liked the way it looked, but over time, and after changing my tablet setup, I struggled to work comfortably in it. The base was a bit too long for my thighs, and the minimum seat height didn't let my feet reach the ground without a footrest. So as you see here, there's a bit of a gap between the back of the character and the back of the seat. That was me. Same with here. The gap between the feet and the ground. It was just... See, this character may look small, but no. The chair is just big. Don't mind that the chair is the smallest size that Secretlab chairs come in. Chair was too big for me. Basically, sitting like this just didn't feel good, and the blood flow would get quite bad in my thighs. It would start to ache after a while. It was okay at first because I like to sit with my legs up anyway, but I think that I didn't realize that sitting with my legs up was a symptom of the problem. When I had my large Cintiq, the armrests were really useful. I could align them with the table height and have my Cintiq very close to me. But now with my 16-inch, I rest my arms on the table instead, and I prefer to sit... I still sit really close to the table, but I just have more of myself kind of on the table, if that makes sense. Before I was off the table, but now this arm, it'll be a little further onto the table. This arm is going to be on the table because my Cintiq is just flat instead of up. Now with my current chair, it can support my back a bit better in the current setup that I have, and my feet can touch the ground because I got a footrest. Actually, the chair, if I make it go as low as possible, my feet can touch the ground and I can have my legs in a right angle. But my desk is actually kind of high, so I need to raise my chair to match the height of the desk, so I have a footrest. This gaming chair, it was... Oh, so here's my current chair, the Sail. From a Miller Sail. This was the Secretlab chair. So the gaming chair was good for leaning back and gaming, and sometimes I would even lean back and draw just because the Cintiq was so close up that I could do that. But the ergonomic chair is definitely better for sitting upright over long periods of time. Who would have thought, right? So in summary, the things that you should look out for when getting a chair yourself. You want to make sure that the chair is adjustable because we are all just built so differently. We have different needs when it comes to the perfect position. So you really want a chair that has as many adjustments as possible. And you want proper back support. The chair should be reclined slightly at an angle of 100 to 110 degrees so that your body weight is distributed across your back evenly. So like this, we can sit on it quite well, and the pressure points is like more spread out. Whereas if you try to sit completely like right angle, because of the natural curve of our spine, there's going to be more pressure on your upper back, which is why it's generally recommended to have a bit of recline. The seat rest should have 3 to 5 centimeters between the back of the knee and the front of the chair. So over here, there should be a slight gap just to make it a little more comfortable for your thighs. And armrests can help if your tablet is close to the edge of the table like I used to have. Because my keyboard had to fit under this desktop riser, I had this hand quite close, just resting on the edge of the table, and if I didn't have the armrest, it would not be good because my arm would probably go down like this, and then all the pressure would be right here on my wrist. Wrist cushions can also provide a more natural angle in some cases, especially for someone who uses the keyboard a lot, and it can alleviate the pressure where you rest your wrist, but the effectiveness definitely varies by design and by person. So if you want a wrist cushion, you might need to do a bit of trial and error to find the right one. I'd recommend stretching often instead. So there's a few stretches that I recommended for wrist. Okay, I'm gonna draw some really terrible hands right now. One is like this. So this is your palm, and it's facing outward, and you use your other hand to pull your hand this way a little bit. That is stretching your wrist, and then you also want to flip this arm the other way so that now your palm is on the inside and the other hand is still moving it this way. And then finally, you can also have your hand like this, but you grab your thumb and you pull it this way as well. Another one that my friend recommended was just massaging your, imagine this is your hand. Massaging upwards. This is your other hand. This is your palm. Massage upwards. But you can just Google. You can Google a whole bunch of different stretches and see what you like. But I definitely recommend stretching. It is good for you. We can do our best to find the best chair in the world for our needs, but in the end, staying sedentary over long periods is the biggest problem. Changing your position often, getting up to stretch, or just moving around can help you with blood flow and avoid health consequences. If you're quite young, while you won't feel the health consequences just yet, it's really good to get into the habit of doing these things early. If our physical health and mind aren't taken care of, how can we draw at our best? Another way to better your posture is to do some workouts focused on areas such as the core or the back. Often the reason you will slouch is due to weak core muscles and muscle fatigue. So strengthening these areas will help you maintain an upright position and counteract the slouching. This also makes for a good break from drawing and staring at a screen, and in general, any sort of exercise just helps make you feel better and refreshed, so I totally recommend it. Finally, I'm going to talk about wrist position while drawing. I've had instances in the past where I have had to rely on using a wrist brace while drawing to relieve pain, or I also developed a wrist that I couldn't put any weight on. So whenever I was like sitting down and using my wrist to help me sit down, it started to hurt. I couldn't put my weight on it, or it would, like, pain would just shoot up my arm. And this was actually due to how I held my pen. So right here, this example here is exactly how I held my pen, because remember how I said I had my Cintiq up and really close to me? So it was like too up. It was almost like a whiteboard, and so anytime I was writing, I wrote like this, and I had this harsh angle on my wrist, and eventually just weakened it so much that it would hurt if I put any. It strained it so much that it would hurt if I put any weight on it. Often our minds are more determined than our body can handle, and this can cause permanent damage. It may feel amusing or quirky to draw to the point of hurting your wrist, especially when you're younger. But believe me, you do not want to have chronic wrist pains that will never go away for the rest of your life, which has happened to more professional artists and students than you may think. If you notice any pain or weakening of your muscles, it's so important to figure out the cause and make adjustments. Don't leave it and wait for it to go away. Some common issues include applying too much pressure, gripping too hard, the wrist angle, and the mouse position, which is why I really like my vertical mouse. So I've drawn up an example here of the difference having a vertical mouse can make. The position of your arm is just more natural, more relaxed. And I noticed that I noticed quite instantly actually that my wrist would get less strained as quickly. So if I keep drawing for days on end, for many hours on end, it still gets strained, but much slower than before when I had a normal mouse. Because when I'm drawing, I actually still use the mouse quite a lot, especially back in the day before the toolbox. I used to use my mouse to zoom in and out. But yeah, now that I have the vertical mouse, I use it for everything. Gaming, art, it's just so good. Essentially to protect against RSI, this is the main injury that artists will get in their wrist. It's called repetitive strain injury. It is important to keep your wrist in a neutral position. So if you use a wrist brace, this is the position that it actually forces your hand into, and there's a reason for that. The best way to imagine it is just having a straight line from your elbow to the hand. You don't want to draw like this. Generally, you don't reach this kind of position anyway, but sometimes this happens, especially if you have a display tablet and you have it tilted up. So that's what I mean by display tablets. They just require a bit more maintenance and sorting out an ergonomic setup. So the last part of this section is to do with the library that exists in your head. The library is a place where you go to find information on certain topics to learn or reference from. For artists, it is the same, except we collect visual elements. I wanted to mention this because I used to not think about this at all. I wondered why I just couldn't come up with designs as cool as what I saw from other people, but I didn't exactly understand what was holding me back. Looking at it now, I think that my visual library was just underdeveloped. I had not been exposed to nor paid attention to as many objects, styles, textures, experiences as I have now. Visually, the difference would look something like this. I couldn't think up ideas because I never explored around or took note of the things I did see, so I didn't know what was out there in the first place. So if you asked me to imagine some clothes for a character, then all I would have known really was, oh yeah, t-shirts and pants exist because, well, I was a kid and that was probably all I wore. The good thing is that it is a lifelong journey and you can accumulate visual information throughout your whole life. Although there are certain options to help boost your visual library. The main the main tip, I suppose, is to observe the world around you. All the patterns, colors, shapes, textures, all of these can be absorbed. Browsing the web, traveling the world, these all expose you to media of different kinds. Be open to new perspectives or ideas because that will introduce new ways for you to visually express yourself. That's not to say you have to memorize everything. References and your visual library work together. A visual library represents the sum total of you, all your visual experiences that influence your taste and expression, whereas references are more so a tool for immediate inspiration or, well, referencing. I hope that roughly explains the purpose and importance of visual libraries. I'll likely be touching on it again throughout the class, but I thought it would be best to make clear of what it is and that you understand why it's important to have as an artist. Okay, I hope that this lesson was enjoyable for you. I will see you in the next one. Bye!